We like this passage. These boats go out into deep water. They catch lots of fish. We like it so much, we pair it with one of those passages from Isaiah that we really love. Here I am, Lord, take me. These passages are all about responding to God. Responding to God to be sent out. And yet, I don't know if you heard closely that story in Isaiah where he has this fabulous vision of cherubim and seraphim, 6 wings. It's a vision that is echoed in the book of Revelation. And it's majestic, holy, holy, holy. And Isaiah, in all of his excitement at this amazing vision, says, I will go. I will go. And then what happens? God says, yes, you will. And they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to hear a thing you say. And you're going to preach and speak and talk. And they are going to ignore everything that you say until cities are ground to the dust, until the tree that is the tree of life is cut to a stump. That is not exciting. I don't know about you, but if someone wants to send me out to speak with joy and hope, telling me that all that's going to be left is the stump of a tree, not motivational. These men in the boat, not yet disciples, these men in the boat had just come in from a long day of fishing, and they were tired. And their beach, it's crowded with all of these people because this dude is out there telling stories and healing people, and they're probably a little bit irritated, right? Seriously, they just want to end their day. They've had a bad day. There's no fish. They're cleaning their nets that probably are full of plants and old boards. And the audacity of this guy, he says, oh no, let me just use your boats. And they're like, okay. So then he gets out, and they go out a little bit from the shore, and he talks. And he just talks, and he keeps talking, and they're probably thinking, I'm so hungry. Please tell those people to stop stamping and walking on my nets that I left on the shore. Don't tangle them up. It took us a while to untangle them. And they're exhausted. And they're probably worried because they didn't catch enough fish to meet either the quota of the Roman governor. They didn't meet enough fish to feed their family. They didn't meet enough fish to sell to their neighbors. Fishing was everything for the life of this village, and they just 2 boats, no fish. And then he says, go into the deep water. Fishing is done in the shallows. When you throw your net out, you're catching those fish that have come in to eat all of the sediment that tends to float up at the shore. These are not deep water fishermen. They do not have deep water boats. The deep water is terrifying. The deep water is dangerous. The currents are stronger. The waves are higher. You don't go out into the deep to get fish. And Jesus says, go out into the deep. And Simon's answer is probably a little bit irritated. If you say so. Maybe if you say so in that kind of whatever, you're already on my boat. And they go out and they catch all of these fish. And isn't Simon's response strange? I am a sinner. Probably because he'd spent the last couple hours being super irritated at this guy on his boat who just asked him to go out and do more work in water where everybody knows you don't catch fish. And yet he did go. And his friends went, and their response is a recognition of the way in which going out into deep water is terrifying. It's dangerous. Going deep is hard and it is uncomfortable. Going deep, whether it's deep water or the deep parts of our lives, it is difficult. We see things we don't want to see. We feel things that we have worked pretty hard to shove down. We have conversations with people that we didn't really quite mean to have. Conversations that themselves become difficult and hard. We had one of those conversations last week. We had a conversation where there was a lot of grief and anger at the way in which this neighborhood has changed. And that's where Jesus calls us, to go deep. To go deep into the places that are stormy, where the waves are higher and the wind is stronger and people's emotions are way more uncomfortable. And we do it in the promise that the fish that we get, they are abundant. We know from experience that our words and the stories we tell and the grief and the frustration and the anger that we feel fall on deaf ears. It's not like the stories that we heard last week about this neighborhood have not been told before. It's not like we haven't heard what happened with I-5 and the Coliseum and Emmanuel Hospital. The fact is, those in control, white Portland, just don't care. They just don't care. This land is valuable for other reasons, right? And that's really awful. It's really awful to feel that way and to realize that a place that you care about is gone and nobody else cares. And to have to tell that story again and again and to have to walk that story by literally walking a neighborhood that has changed, that's exhausting. And it's hard. It's hard to do it and relive it. It's hard to hear it for the first, second, or third time. And that's what we're called to. We're called to go deep. The gift that the church has to offer the world is not a really awesome streaming service. It's not massive social welfare programs. The gift that the church has to offer the world is deep relationship. It is something that our society is not good at. I'm not really sure any society is actually terribly good at it. We like to trash our own society, but I think the reality is deep relationship is always hard. It is always uncomfortable. It causes us to respond and react and feel in ways that we work pretty hard to not feel. And yet this is what we have to offer the world. It is frankly what we have to offer this neighborhood. This neighborhood where we see a lack of connection, where we see a life that is so unfamiliar for some of us. It's a life where people are not able to be connected well. And that is a gift that we can offer. It's not a big gift. It's not a big tree. It's a stump. It's a stump that in this parish, I think especially, it feels like our tree has been cut down over the years. It's certainly gotten smaller and smaller, and I think for some of us, we feel like it's been cut down and it's kind of toppled over. But we Oregonians, we know what comes from stumps. A little stump town has an awful lot of trees in it. And we know what grows in the stumps in our yards, the trees that come over in ice storms. We see the new growth that comes from it. I remember going to Mount St. Helens the moment they let us back in. I watched it explode up there on Terwilliger Boulevard with my mom. We watched it explode, and the moment they let us back in, when it was safe enough to go, I remember stumps as far as the eye could see. It was like someone had taken a comb and just combed all the trees flat. And all that was left were stumps and these huge trees, like twigs, just all in the same direction for miles. And I remember going back year after year and watching things grow. I was at Mount St. Helens a couple years ago, and I watched hummingbirds hang out in what was left of a tree that had snapped off. They had a nest. Hummingbirds. I didn't even know hummingbirds existed at that elevation. Apparently they do. Jesus calls us to go deep. Jesus invites us into a conversation where we're not at all sure that the people around us, or even one another, are going to hear one another particularly well. But the promise of God is a stump from which life continues to come. It may not be big and majestic. It may not be what we remember, but it is full of the life-giving Spirit of God. A God who calls us to deep waters, to deep conversation, to discomfort, to high waves and strong winds, and helps us come back with a load of fish that is bigger and more and unexpected. That's what we are called into as Christians. It's not easy. It is not comfortable. We may only get to see little shoots, but that is the gift that we have to offer the world. Amen.